I'm Astrid Cooper, 32, and I just watched my entire family dynamic implode over tiramisu at my parents' dining table. Elliot's moving into your beach house next month, my mother announced cheerfully as if telling me about the weather. My $480,000 beach house that I purchased alone. My sanctuary. My brother smiled smugly while my parents beamed. They had decided this without me, and somehow I was the villain when I said no. Hey everyone, before I dive into how my family tried to commandeer the home I worked years to afford, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever had family members who felt entitled to your belongings, hit that like button. And if you want more family drama stories where karma eventually comes knocking, subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the moment my parents decided my property was their bargaining chip. I've always been the responsible one. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut, I worked weekends at the local cafe from age 16, saved every dollar I could, and put myself through business school with minimal loans. My financial independence wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. Astrid knows how to stand on her own 2 feet, my father would boast to relatives even as I ate ramen for dinner to save money during college. My younger brother Elliot, however, lived under completely different rules. 3 years, my junior at 29, he had managed to drop out of 3 different colleges each time with my parents rushing to comfort him. That college isn't for everyone and you just haven't found your passion yet. Each fresh start came with a new car, a rent-covered apartment, or some other cushion to soften the blow of his latest failure. The contrast in our treatment was stark but familiar. When I struggled with calculus sophomore year, Mom suggested I try harder and maybe find a study group. When Elliot failed his entire first semester, they hired him a private tutor and blamed the teaching methods at his university. None of this stopped me from achieving my goals. After graduation, I climbed the ladder at a digital marketing firm, securing promotions every 18 months, until I made executive level by age 30. My salary doubled, then tripled. I lived frugally in a small apartment, invested wisely, and saved aggressively. The dream that kept me going through 12-hour workdays and missed social events was that beach house on the Connecticut shoreline. I can still remember the day I got the keys. Standing alone on the weathered deck overlooking the Long Island Sound, I cried, actually sobbed from the realization that something I wanted so badly was finally mine. The modest 3-bedroom cottage needed work, but it had good bones and an unobstructed view of the water. I spent weekends refinishing floors, painting walls, and carefully selecting furniture that would make it both comfortable and beautiful. That house represented everything I had sacrificed and worked for. It was my sanctuary, my achievement, and my future. I planned to retire there someday, watching sunsets from the deck and walking the beach at low tide. In the meantime, it was my weekend retreat from the corporate pressure cooker and occasionally a gathering place for the few close friends who had stood by me during my climb. During those same years, Elliot bounced from job to job, his resume a patchwork of 3-month stints and mutual partings. He tried bartending but couldn't maintain the schedule. He tried pharmaceutical sales but couldn't handle the pressure. He tried real estate but couldn't close a deal. Each failure was someone else's fault, a boss who had it out for him, co-workers who were impossible to work with, or an industry that was rigged against newcomers. Most recently, he convinced my parents to invest in his foolproof business idea, a premium dog walking service that would somehow revolutionize the industry. $10,000 later, the business folded when Elliot lost interest after just 2 months. This disaster was followed by whispers of gambling debts, though my parents deflected my questions with practiced vagueness. I wasn't completely heartless. I'd tried to help Elliot responsibly, connecting him with recruiters in my network, and even paying for sessions with a financial advisor. Each effort was met with initial enthusiasm that quickly fizzled into excuses. The recruiter only had corporate jobs, and I need something creative. The financial guy was too rigid about budgeting. My parents never pushed him to follow through, always ready with justifications for his behavior. Elliot's spirit is too free for conventional paths, my mother would say. Or my father's favorite, he just needs to find his thing like you found marketing. The tension between us had been brewing for years, with my parents constantly suggesting I should help out my brother. Their definition of help evolved from lending him money, which was never repaid, to suggestions that he temporarily stay at my apartment in the city, which I firmly refused. Lately, they'd been dropping hints about my beach house having so much extra space and how families should support each other. I deflected these comments, never imagining they would bypass my consent entirely. After all, it was my house, my name on the deed, my mortgage payments. Surely they wouldn't go that far. I was wrong. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a tradition I maintained despite my busy schedule and the hour-long drive from the city. This particular evening seemed normal at first, Dad grilling about work, Mom fussing over whether I was eating enough, and Elliot arriving late with no apology. We moved through the usual choreography of family conversation, Mom's garden, Dad's golf game, surface-level updates about our lives that avoided anything too personal or potentially contentious. The bomb dropped during dessert. "We have wonderful news," my mother announced, serving slices of her homemade tiramisu, with a smile that should have warned me. "Elliot's moving into your beach house next month. Isn't that perfect? He needs a fresh start and you're hardly there during the week anyway." I froze, fork suspended between plate and mouth, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry what," my father jumped in with practiced casualness. "It makes perfect sense, Astrid. That house sits empty 5 days a week, and Elliot needs to get back on his feet. It's just temporary, of course." Elliot lounged back in his chair, smirking. "Don't worry, sis. I'll water your plants and keep an eye on the place. It's actually pretty convenient for everyone." The audacity struck me speechless for several seconds. They were discussing my property, my most precious asset and personal sanctuary, as if it were community property, as if I had no say in the matter. "No," I finally said, setting down my fork with deliberate control. "That's not happening." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What do you mean, no?" my mother asked, her smile faltering. "I mean no, Elliot is not moving into my house. That's not a possibility." I kept my voice level, fighting to maintain composure. "Don't be selfish, Astrid," my father said, his tone hardening. "Your brother needs help, and family supports family. We've always been there for you." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it, a harsh, incredulous sound. Been there for me. I put myself through college. I built my career alone. I saved for that house for years while living in a studio apartment. When exactly were you there for me? Elliot rolled his eyes dramatically. Here we go with the self-made success story again. Some of us weren't handed the same advantages. Advantages, I nearly choked on the word. What advantages? You've had every safety net imaginable. That's enough, my mother interjected sharply. Astrid, your brother has struggled and he needs this. It's just a house. Family is what matters. It's not just a house, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. It's my house. My name is on the deed, my money paid for it, and I decide who lives there. My father leaned forward, his expression darkening. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by refusing to help your own brother when he needs it. What have you done for me that obligates me to hand over my property? I challenged. We raised you, my mother cried, tears already welling in her eyes, her standard defense mechanism. We gave you life, a home, an education. You did the bare minimum parents are supposed to do. I responded, the words flying out before I could soften them. And you gave Elliot everything while expecting me to make it on my own. Now you want to give him my house too. You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness, my mother sobbed, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Elliot sat back watching the drama unfold, with barely concealed satisfaction. I told you she wouldn't help, he said to my parents. She's always been this way, thinking she's better than everyone because she has money now. That's not fair, I said, turning to him. I've offered to help you find work, connect you with a financial advisor. We don't need your kind of help, my father interrupted. Elliot needs space and time to find his path. You have the means to provide that, and you're choosing not to. That makes you heartless, Astrid. The word hit like a physical blow. Heartless. Because I wouldn't surrender my most valued possession to a brother who had never shown responsibility or gratitude. I think I should go, I said quietly, standing from the table. If you walk out that door without agreeing to help your brother, my father warned, you'll regret it. I looked at each of them, my father's angry face, my mother's theatrical tears, my brother's smug expression, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This was exploitation. I already regret coming tonight, I said, and left without another word. In the car, my phone rang. It was Aunt Celia, my mother's sister. I almost didn't answer, assuming she was another flying monkey sent to pressure me, but something made me pick up. Astrid, I heard there was a blow-up at dinner, she said cautiously. News travels fast, I replied bitterly. Listen, honey, I need to tell you something. This isn't the first time they've promised your property to Elliot. Last Christmas, I overheard them telling him he could use your city apartment whenever he wanted. They said you'd come around once they presented it as a done deal. The betrayal cut even deeper than I thought possible. That night I couldn't sleep. Tossing in bed, replaying the dinner conversation, I felt like I was seeing my family clearly for the first time. The patterns had always been there, the different standards, the constant pressure to give more while Elliot took endlessly, but I had normalized it, accepted it, as just how our family worked. No more. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I'd done perhaps 3 times in my entire career, and began investigating what else might be happening behind my back. First, I checked Elliot's social media accounts. There it was in plain sight, a post from 2 weeks ago telling his friends they should get ready for beach parties all summer at his new place on the shore. Several comments followed, friends congratulating him and calling dibs on guest rooms. He had even promised someone they could host a birthday party there in July. The timestamps proved this plan had been in the works for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which my parents had called me multiple times, never mentioning this arrangement they'd already promised to Elliot. I dug deeper. Text messages from friends referenced Elliot's excitement about moving to the beach. His ex-girlfriend had commented on how lucky he was to have such a sweet setup. It wasn't just a casual idea thrown around, it was a fully formed plan in which I was the only uninformed participant. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I remembered my mother asking for a spare key to my beach house last month in case of emergencies. I had given it to her without hesitation. Had they already given it to Elliot? Had he already been there without my knowledge? I called my neighbor at the beach, an elderly woman named Martha, who kept an eye on the property when I wasn't there. Oh, Astrid, I was going to call you. I saw your brother there yesterday, showing some friends around the outside. I thought you knew. My hands shook as I thanked her and hung up. They had not only planned this behind my back but had already begun implementing it without my consent. More digging revealed that Elliot had lost his apartment the previous month, due to unpaid rent information my parents had conveniently omitted from our conversations. Instead of having him move in with them, they had a perfectly good spare bedroom in their house. They had decided my property was the solution. I found email receipts in my parents' shared family account which I had access to for emergency purposes, showing they had been financially supporting Elliot far more extensively than they had admitted. Regular transfers paid bills, even a loan repayment to someone named Vincent that looked suspiciously like covering a gambling debt, all while telling me that Elliot was mostly supporting himself and just needed occasional help. The most damning discovery came that afternoon when I drove to my parents' house while they were both at work. Using the emergency key they'd given me years ago, I let myself in with the intention of finding any additional evidence of their plans for my property. In my father's desk drawer, I found a spare key to my beach house, not the one I had given my mother, but a new one. They had made a copy. Beside it was a handwritten list of house rules for Elliot to follow while living at Astrid's place, along with a crude budget that included no rental payment to me, but did include a generous spending allowance they planned to provide him. They had orchestrated the entire thing, creating a plan that benefited only Elliot while completely disregarding my ownership and agency. As I sat in my car afterward, the full weight of the betrayal crushed down on me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a spontaneous bad decision. This was calculated. They had deliberately conspired to take control of my property, counting on my habitual compliance and family loyalty to force my acceptance once it was presented as a fait accompli. For the first time in my adult life, I called my best friend Vanessa in tears. "I don't know who my family is anymore," I told her, my voice breaking. "I do," she replied, with the clarity of an outsider. "They're people who see you as a resource, not a person. And sweetheart, it's time you stopped letting them." The next morning I woke with swollen eyes and a clearer mind. After years of compliance and peacekeeping, I needed a different approach to protect myself from my own family. This would require strategy, not just emotion. First, I called a locksmith and had the locks changed at my beach house. I also contracted a security company to install cameras and a digital entry system that would alert me to any visitors. No more unauthorized access. Next, I made an appointment with both a therapist and a lawyer. I needed professional guidance for what was clearly going to be a difficult confrontation and its aftermath. Dr. Melanie Barnes, the therapist Vanessa recommended, helped me see the situation from a clinical perspective. "What you're describing sounds like family enmeshment and financial exploitation," she explained during our emergency session. "Your parents have created different roles for you and your brother. You're the provider, he's the recipient. When you challenge those roles, it threatens the family system they've established." "But why would they do that?" I asked. "Why treat us so differently? Family dynamics are complex. Sometimes parents unconsciously set different expectations based on gender, birth order, or even which child reminds them of themselves or other family members. What matters now is recognizing that you're not obligated to maintain these unhealthy patterns." We discussed strategies for setting and maintaining boundaries, dealing with guilt, and preparing for the emotional manipulation that would likely intensify when I confronted my family. "They'll try to make you feel selfish and cruel," Dr. Barnes warned. "They'll tell you that family means sacrifice. Remember that healthy family relationships involve mutual respect, not one-sided exploitation." The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, was equally direct. "Legally, you're on solid ground," he assured me. "The property is yours alone. They have no claim to it whatsoever, regardless of family relationships." He helped me draft a formal letter, stating that no one had permission to occupy my beach house without written consent, which would serve as documentation if legal action became necessary. "I hope it doesn't come to this," he said, "but you should be prepared for the possibility that they may attempt to move your brother in despite your objections. If that happens, you would legally be dealing with trespassers." The word trespassers applied to my own family felt surreal, but it accurately described what they were planning. Over the next week, I immersed myself in research about family psychology, enmeshment, and establishing healthy boundaries with parents as an adult. I joined online forums where others shared similar experiences, finding both comfort and strength in their stories. Many had faced the difficult choice between maintaining peace and maintaining self-respect, and those who chose the latter while often experiencing painful short-term consequences reported greater long-term well-being. I also built a support system, sharing the full story with trusted friends who could help me stay strong when my resolve wavered. Vanessa offered her guest room if I needed space. My colleague Michael, who had gone through a similar family estrangement, offered practical advice about handling holidays and family events. My neighbor Martha promised to alert me immediately if anyone showed up at the beach house. As the days passed, my parents called repeatedly. I let the calls go to voicemail, not yet ready for a conversation I couldn't control. Their messages evolved from concerned, "We need to talk about what happened," to irritated, "You're being childish by ignoring us," to manipulative, "Your father's blood pressure is up because of this stress." Elliot texted once, "Way to cause drama, princess. Mom's been crying for days." I blocked his number. By the end of the week, I felt prepared emotionally and legally to confront my family. I had scripts prepared for their likely arguments. I had practiced responses to emotional triggers. I had documentation of their deception and clear statements of my boundaries. Most importantly, I had come to terms with the possibility that this confrontation might permanently damage my family relationships. If they couldn't respect my basic rights as an adult and property owner, perhaps those relationships weren't worth preserving in their current form. I sent a group text to my parents and Elliot, "I'd like to meet at your house this Saturday at 2 p.m. to discuss recent events. I'll be there for 1 hour. Please confirm." My mother responded immediately, "Finally, you're being reasonable. We'll see you then." Her confident tone suggested she expected me to capitulate. She had no idea what was coming. "Hey everyone, I know this is getting intense, but stick with me because the next part is where things really explode. If you've ever had to stand up to family manipulation, drop a comment below about how you handled it. This might be a good time to grab some water or tea before we continue, because trust me, you'll want to be fully present for what happens next. If you're finding value in this story, please hit that like button to help others find it too. Now let's get back to the showdown. Saturday arrived with a knot in my stomach but certainty in my mind. I drove to my parents' house armed with a folder containing printouts of Elliot's social media posts, my property deed, the unauthorized key I'd found, and the legal letter Mr. Harrison had prepared. I had also recorded a voice memo on my phone, listing my boundaries, which I'd listened to repeatedly on the drive over to stay focused. My parents and Elliot were waiting in the living room when I arrived, their expressions suggesting they expected either an apology or a negotiation. I sat in the armchair across from the couch, placing physical distance between us. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want to discuss what happened last Sunday and clear up some apparent misunderstandings about my beach house." "There's no misunderstanding," my father interrupted. "Family helps family. That's how it works." "Please let me finish," I said firmly. "There is a misunderstanding about who makes decisions regarding my property. To be absolutely clear, I am the sole owner of the beach house. I alone decide who lives there, visits there, or has access to it. I have not and will not agree to Elliot moving in." Elliot scoffed. "Seriously, you're going to let a house come between family?" I turned to him directly. "This isn't about the house. It's about respect and boundaries. You and our parents made plans involving my property without consulting me, then expected me to agree once it was presented as a done deal. We knew you'd make a fuss if we asked first," my mother said, as if this justified their actions. "Sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. That approach might work for borrowing a sweater, not for moving someone into a house they don't own," I replied. "And based on my discoveries this week, this wasn't a spontaneous idea." I opened my folder and placed Elliot's social media posts on the coffee table. Elliot has been telling friends about his new beach house for weeks. He's been promising parties and overnight stays. He even brought friends by to show them around. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Elliot just shrugged. "So what, you never use the place during the week anyway?" "That's irrelevant," I said. "It's my house regardless of how often I'm there." "You've always been selfish with your things," my mother snapped. "Even as a child, you never wanted to share." "This isn't about sharing, Mom. This is about autonomy and respect." I turned to my father. I also found this in your desk. I placed the copied key and their house rules document on the table. You made an unauthorized copy of my key and created rules for someone to live in my house, all without my knowledge or consent. My father had the decency to look embarrassed but quickly recovered. We were just being practical. Elliot needs a place to stay and you have extra space. If extra space is the issue, why not offer your own guest room? I asked pointedly. That's different, my mother replied quickly. We're too old to have a young person disrupting our routines. Your beach house is perfect for a fresh start. So you admit this is about your convenience, not any actual necessity, I said. Elliot lost his apartment due to unpaid rent, another fact you concealed from me. Now you want me to provide free housing instead of addressing the actual problem. What's that supposed to mean? Elliot demanded, sitting forward aggressively. It means you need to take responsibility for your finances and living situation instead of expecting bailouts. And mom and dad need to stop enabling behavior that keeps you dependent. My father's face reddened. Now, you're telling us how to be parents. Your brother has had challenges you couldn't understand. What challenges he's been given? Every advantage, I replied. But that's not even the point. The point is that my property is not yours to promise away. After everything we've sacrificed for you, my mother began, tears starting right on cue. I cut her off, unwilling to be manipulated. I've prepared this document stating clearly that no one has permission to occupy my beach house without my written consent. I placed the legal letter on top of the growing pile of evidence. I've already changed the locks and installed security cameras. Any attempt to enter or occupy the property without permission will be considered trespassing. The room went deadly silent. Then Elliot exploded. You changed the locks, who do you think you are? He jumped to his feet. Mom and Dad already promised me I could use the place. They even gave me the key last week. This was news, they had actually given him the unauthorized key already. I kept my composure despite the fresh wave of betrayal. Then they promised something that wasn't theirs to give. What about my car? Elliot demanded. Are you going to back out of that too? I stared at him in confusion. What car? Elliot looked at our parents, who both suddenly seemed intensely interested in the carpet pattern. The Audi, he said. They said I could use your Audi for job interviews and dates since you have the company car now. Another bombshell. They had promised him my car too, a vehicle I used every weekend and had no intention of sharing. I never agreed to that either, I said quietly, looking at my parents. Is there anything else you've promised Elliot that belongs to me? My mother shifted uncomfortably. Well, we may have told him he could have some of your old furniture for when he gets a new apartment. And your TV, my father added reluctantly. The one from your apartment that you put in storage when you got the bigger one. And the collection of first edition books Grandma left you, Elliot added with a shrug. I mentioned to someone that I was getting them, and they offered good money. The books my grandmother had lovingly collected and left specifically to me in her will. Books that were among my most treasured possessions stored carefully at my apartment. Those books were Grandma's gift to me, I said, my voice shaking slightly for the first time. They're not for sale. You don't even read them, Elliot shouted. They're just sitting on a shelf, that's not the point. They're mine to decide what to do with. Oh, here we go with the mine routine again, my mother sighed dramatically. Astrid, we raised you to be generous. Something in me snapped at the hypocrisy. Where was this emphasis on sharing and generosity when you gave away my childhood belongings without asking? My parents looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? My collection of porcelain dolls that disappeared when I was in college. My high school yearbooks and trophies that weren't in the attic when I asked about them last year. The quilt Great Aunt Susan made me that suddenly wasn't anywhere to be found. My mother waved dismissively. Those were just taking up space. We gave the dolls to your cousin Lisa's daughters. The rest was probably donated during spring cleaning. Those were my possessions, my memories, I said, fighting back tears of frustration. You had no right to dispose of them without even asking me if I wanted to keep them. You were an adult with your own place, my father countered. If they mattered, you should have taken them with you. I was in a studio apartment during college, and my first job I couldn't fit everything. You said you'd keep them safe for me. The conversation had veered far from my carefully planned confrontation, exposing deeper patterns of disregard for my boundaries and possessions. Look, my father said, his tone conciliatory but condescending, what's done is done with your old things. Let's focus on the current situation. Surely we can reach a compromise about the beach house. Maybe Elliot could just stay there weekdays or pay a small rent. No, I interrupted, firmly gathering the documents and standing up. There is no compromise here. The beach house is my property, and Elliot will not be living there, not weekdays, not weekends, not ever. I've made my position clear and taken steps to enforce it. You would really deny your own brother a place to stay? My mother asked incredulously. He has a place to stay right here with you, I replied. And if that doesn't work, he's an adult who can find his own housing just like I did. This isn't over, Astrid, my father warned as I headed for the door. Actually it is, I said, pausing in the doorway. My decision about my property is final. And until you all can respect my boundaries, I think we need some distance. I walked out, ignoring the protests and accusations that followed me to the car. As I drove away, my phone began buzzing with messages, but I didn't look. For the first time in years, I felt a strange combination of devastation and liberation. The next morning, the silent treatment began. My usual Sunday text from my mother never came. My father, who typically sent silly dad jokes on weekends, was conspicuously quiet. It shouldn't have hurt, I had set this boundary after all, but 32 years of family ties aren't severed without pain. The flying monkeys arrived by Tuesday. First came a call from Uncle Robert, my father's brother. Astrid honey, I hear there's been some trouble with the family, he began cautiously. Did my parents ask you to call? I asked directly. A pause, then a sigh. Your mother might have mentioned they're worried about you. Said you've been acting out of character, refusing to help Elliot when he's down on his luck. That's their version, I replied. Did they mention they promised him my house without asking me? Well, they said you have this beach property sitting empty most of the time, and family should help family. I realized he'd been given the edited version, one that cast me as selfish and unreasonable. I gave him the full story, including the unauthorized key and the social media posts. Jesus, he muttered when I finished. That's not what they told me. I'm not surprised, I said. But I won't be manipulated into surrendering my property, even to family. Uncle Robert was just the first. Calls and texts came from various relatives, each having received the sanitized version that positioned me as the villain. Most backed off when they heard my side, though. A few maintained that family comes first, no matter what. Then came the social media offensive. Elliot posted a vague but pointed message about people who achieve success and forget where they came from, and how some people value property over family. He didn't name me, but the timing and phrasing made it clear who he meant. Friends and relatives commented with supportive messages for him, many containing thinly veiled criticisms of me. Some people just get too big for their britches, wrote one cousin. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water, added an aunt. I resisted the urge to respond publicly. This wasn't a fight I wanted to have on social media, with its potential for escalation and permanence. Instead, I muted the posts and focused on processing my feelings privately and with my small circle of trusted friends. Vanessa was my rock through it all. They're trying to make you doubt yourself, she observed over coffee at my apartment. Classic manipulation tactic. If they can make you question your own reasonable boundaries, you'll be more likely to give in. It's working a little, I admitted. Sometimes I wonder if I am being selfish. There's this voice in my head saying, maybe I should just let him stay there during the week. That's your conditioning talking, Vanessa said firmly. They programmed you from childhood to put Elliot's needs above your own. But ask yourself, if a friend told you her family had done this to her, what would you tell her? Put that way, the answer was obvious. I would be outraged on my friend's behalf. I would tell her she had every right to protect her property and establish boundaries. Exactly, Vanessa said when I shared this realization. You deserve the same support you'd give others. As May turned to June, I maintained my distance from my family while working to strengthen my resolve with Dr. Barnes. In therapy, we explored the deep-rooted family dynamics that had led to this crisis. Your parents created a dynamic where Elliot's needs always trumped yours, Dr. Barnes explained. When you were compliant, the system worked for them. Now that you're standing up for yourself, they're trying to force you back into your assigned role. Will they ever understand my perspective? I asked. That depends on whether they can recognize and take responsibility for their part in this dysfunctional system, she replied honestly. Some families can evolve when confronted with clear boundaries. Others double down on their established patterns. The answer came in late June, when I received a text from my mother that simply read, "Elliot needs $5,000 for first and last month's rent on a new apartment. Since you won't help with the beach house, this is the least you can do. Call me to arrange the transfer." No apology, no acknowledgement of their boundary violations. Just another demand phrased as an obligation. I didn't respond. 3 days later, my father called. When I didn't answer, he left a voicemail. "Astrid, this silent treatment is childish. Your brother is in a real bind here. He found a nice apartment but needs the deposit money by Friday. Your mother and I would cover it, but we're stretched thin right now with helping him cover some other expenses. Call us back." Again, I didn't respond. My silence must have been unnerving, because the next day, I received an unexpected email from Elliot himself, the first direct communication since I had blocked his number. "Astrid, I know we're not talking right now, but I really need your help with this apartment deposit. Mom and Dad can't swing it, and I promise I'll pay you back once my new job starts next month. It's not like you'd even miss $5,000 with what you make. Don't be petty just because you're mad about the beach house thing." There it was again, the assumption that my resources were essentially family property available on demand regardless of my wishes. No apology, no recognition of the boundary violation, just the expectation that I would comply because family. I drafted multiple responses but sent none of them. Any engagement would only open the door to further manipulation. Instead, I forwarded the email to Dr. Barnes with the subject line "Progress." She responded within hours, "This isn't progress, it's a different approach to the same behavior. They're still treating you as a resource, rather than a person with valid boundaries. Stay the course." July arrived, bringing with it the first family birthday since our confrontation, my mother's 65th. In previous years, I would have organized a celebration complete with her favorite cake and thoughtful gifts. This year I sent a card with a restaurant gift certificate, but declined the small gathering my father organized. My absence was noted and weaponized. Relatives reported back that my mother had been heartbroken by my snub, and that my father had made pointed remarks about fair-weather family members. It hurt, but I recognized the emotional manipulation for what it was. My boundaries weren't a punishment or an attack. They were necessary protection from people who had demonstrated they didn't respect my autonomy. The real breakthrough came in early August when I received a large envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside were several photographs from my childhood pictures I had believed lost when my parents cleaned out my belongings. There was also a handwritten note from my Aunt Celia. "Astrid, I rescued these when your parents were purging your things. I've kept them safe thinking you might want them someday. I've heard their version of recent events, but knowing how they've always treated your possessions, I suspect there's more to the story. When you're ready to talk, I'm here." The simple act of validation from someone within the family brought me to tears. Someone else had seen the pattern. Someone else understood that my boundaries were reasonable and necessary. Meanwhile, more troubling news about Elliot emerged through the family grapevine. Apparently, he had been fired from his last job, not laid off as he'd claimed, but terminated for borrowing money from the cash register. This revelation explained his sudden urgency for housing and financial assistance. When my mother texted again in September, reiterating that Elliot desperately needed money and I was the only one who could help, I finally broke my silence with a simple response. I'm aware of why he was fired from his job. I won't be providing financial support under these circumstances. Her reply was telling. Who told you about that? That's private family business. The irony of her suddenly caring about privacy and boundaries when it suited her purposes wasn't lost on me. 6 months after that fateful Sunday dinner, I received an unexpected phone call from my father. I almost didn't answer, expecting another demand disguised as a family obligation, but something made me pick up. Astrid, he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I'm listening, I replied cautiously. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I've been doing some thinking about everything that happened. The beach house, the way we handled it. We were wrong. The admission stunned me into silence. We should never have promised Elliot your property or made copies of your key, he continued when I didn't respond. I see now that we crossed a line. What brought this on? I asked, not quite ready to accept the apparent apology at face value. He sighed heavily. Reality, I suppose. Elliot's been living with us since his apartment fell through. It's been challenging. He stays out all hours, leaves messes everywhere, borrowed your mother's car without permission, and returned it with an empty tank. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of vindication. They were finally experiencing what they had tried to foist on me. There's more, my father added. We recently discovered he's been gambling again, pretty heavily. He took your mother's credit card and ran up quite a bill before we caught it. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it despite everything. Addiction was a serious problem, and Elliot clearly needed help beyond financial bailouts. We finally had to give him an ultimatum, my father continued. Get help, or find somewhere else to live. He's entered a treatment program for the gambling. It's early days, but he seems to be taking it seriously. That's good, I said. He needs professional help, not just money and free housing. You were right about that, my father admitted, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. We've been enabling him for years, making excuses, solving his problems for him. It hasn't helped him become independent, it's done the opposite. The acknowledgement I had longed for but never expected to hear. I owe you an apology, Astrid. A real one. His voice cracked slightly. We were wrong to expect you to sacrifice your property. Wrong to go behind your back. Wrong to call you heartless for setting a reasonable boundary. I took a deep breath, processing his words. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge what happened. Your mother is coming around more slowly, he added. She still struggles with the idea that helping Elliot doesn't always mean giving him whatever he wants. But she does miss you. We both do. I've missed you too, I admitted, but I can't go back to the old dynamics. My boundaries around my property are non-negotiable. I understand that now, he said. I'm not asking you to change your position. I'm just hoping we might start rebuilding some trust. Perhaps meet for coffee next week, just the two of us. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. The conversation was awkward but honest. My father seemed genuinely reflective about the family patterns that had led to our estrangement. I've been thinking about how differently we treated you and Elliot growing up, he confessed over his second cup of coffee. We expected you to be independent but coddled him. It wasn't fair to either of you. Why the different standards? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. He considered this thoughtfully. Your mother and I never discussed it explicitly, but looking back, I think we saw your self-sufficiency as a strength to nurture. You were always so capable even as a child. Elliot struggled more, so we compensated by lowering expectations. But that just reinforced the pattern I pointed out. The more capable I became, the more you expected from me. The more Elliot struggled, the less you required of him. My father nodded slowly. You're right. We thought we were playing to your strengths, but we were actually creating a terrible imbalance. You deserved more support, and Elliot needed more accountability. This insight, while validating, couldn't immediately heal years of inequity. But it was a start, an acknowledgement of the problem that had to precede any meaningful change. Reconnecting with my mother took longer. Her first attempt at reconciliation still contained subtle barbs about my stubbornness, and how I had made everything more difficult than it needed to be. I maintained my boundaries, making it clear that I would only rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect. By Thanksgiving, we had progressed enough to attempt a family dinner with ground rules established beforehand. Elliot, now 3 months into his gambling recovery program, was also working with a therapist on taking responsibility for his actions. The dinner wasn't perfect. Old communication patterns resurfaced occasionally, requiring gentle but firm correction. But there was genuine effort on all sides to create healthier interactions. Elliot and I had a private conversation on the porch afterward. I'm sorry, he said simply. For everything with the beach house, the way I talked about you to friends and family, the things I said at that dinner. You had every right to say no. Thank you for that, I replied, surprised but appreciative of his directness. The therapist at the treatment center has been helping me see how I've blamed everyone else for my problems, he continued. I've been entitled and selfish, expecting bailouts instead of standing on my own feet. I nodded, unsure what to say, but grateful for his insight. I'm not asking for anything, he clarified quickly. I just wanted you to know, I'm working on my issues. Maybe someday I can be a brother you're actually glad to have. I'd like that, I said, and meant it. By Christmas, our family dynamic had shifted noticeably. My parents consulted me before making plans involving my time or resources. Elliot had secured a job at a local hardware store, not glamorous but steady work with a manager who knew about his recovery and was supportive. He had also moved into a modest studio apartment, paying his own rent from his earnings. My mother still occasionally slipped into old patterns, particularly when Elliot faced challenges. Couldn't you help him with? She'd begin before catching herself. Sorry, I'm doing it again, aren't I? Progress wasn't linear, but it was real. The following summer, I made a significant gesture. I invited my parents and Elliot to the beach house for a weekend on my terms. It wasn't a standing invitation or open access, but a specific time-limited visit where I maintained control of my property while sharing its enjoyment. Standing on the deck, watching the sunset with my family, I reflected on the painful but necessary journey of the past year. The breach had been painful, the rebuilding, slow, and sometimes frustrating. But the new family dynamic, one based on respect rather than exploitation, was worth the struggle. It's really beautiful here, my mother said, joining me at the railing. I can see why it means so much to you. Thank you, I replied, hearing the deeper acknowledgement in her words. I'm sorry we tried to take it from you, she added softly, surprising me with her directness. We were wrong, and I'm grateful you stood your ground. Not just for your sake but for Elliot's too. He needed to face consequences instead of getting another bailout. I squeezed her hand too, moved for words. That evening, watching my family interact with new awareness and respect, I realized that sometimes family loyalty means setting firm boundaries, not because you love family less, but because healthy relationships require honesty and respect. To flourish, the beach house was more than just property. It had become the catalyst for transforming destructive patterns into healthier connections. True family support isn't about unconditional sacrifice of your needs and boundaries. It's about respecting each other as individuals while maintaining the bonds that matter. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to say no when necessary, and hold firm until they can recognize and respect your boundaries. In standing up for myself, I hadn't destroyed my family, I had ultimately helped create a healthier one. Guys, that's my story of family betrayal and eventual healing. I'd love to hear about your experiences with setting boundaries with family members. Has anyone else had to take a difficult stand to protect something important to you? How did it work out? Drop your stories in the comments below. If you found this story helpful or relatable, please hit that like button so more people can find it. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and life lessons. I've learned that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the greatest healing, and I hope sharing my experience helps others facing similar struggles. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, true family love includes respect for boundaries. See you in the next video.